What is the practice that we consider to be advanced? And then how do we educate for that practice? It is not just about one role. And this is a confusion internationally. You will see later when we look at ICN's definition, there are many countries that only discuss the nurse practitioner as if that is the only advanced practice nurse. This is not my belief. I think in the United States we have 4 roles that are advanced practice nursing roles. Those roles are clinical nurse specialist, nurse practitioner, nurse midwife. We have advanced nurse midwifery in the United States, which is an advanced practice role, and nurse anesthesia is an advanced practice role. So when I talk about advanced practice nursing, I am not talking about a particular role. I am talking about the idea that supports all of these roles. Are you with me so far? I also began to think about advanced practice as a set of competencies. Competencies are areas of expanded knowledge and skilled performance. This is how I understand a competency. It is an additional knowledge and skill that you apply in your practice. I also began to realize that we need a clear and consistent definition of advanced practice, or we become very confused in our discussions. I think that some of you are also reflecting some of the confusion as you are moving from specialization toward advanced practice nursing, and I hope that maybe my remarks will be helpful to you. So, specialization is a concentration in a specific clinical area. The speakers this morning have mentioned some specialties such as oncology, such as pain management, such as palliative care. These are very important specialties. There are many nurses who are specialized in the care of patients with these problems. In fact, most nurses are specialized in some sense because we have very few generalist practices that do everything. Most all of us now, because of the pace of knowledge expansion, are really specialization. We have specialized in an area of nursing. My specialization was in neurology and neurosurgery, and secondary in orthopedic surgery. That was my specialization. When I went to become a clinical specialist, I expanded my competencies in the area of neurology and neurosurgery to be able to give more sophisticated care to those patients. So all advanced practice nurses are specialized. But advanced practice nursing goes beyond specialization. It also includes practice expansion. So it is expected that advanced practice nurses are using the core competencies in their practice in an expanded sense from that is available to a specialist nurse. It also includes educational advancement to be able to strengthen the competencies in the areas of research-based, theory-based, and practice-based. In the United States, education is education for a specific role. When I began, a master's was just a master's. You got a master's. Now you get a master's as a clinical specialist, or a master's as a nurse practitioner, or a master's as a nurse anesthetist. So you are prepared at the master's level for an advanced practice role very deliberately, because these practices have continued to evolve and are more and more complex. Education I see as a means to an end. So as I said before, the question is, what is the end? That drives how we educate. If you look around the world, and if you actually look at the history of advanced practice nursing in États-Unis, you will see that there are 4 very discernible stages. And I do not have a lot of time to talk about these stages, but I may be able to talk about them tomorrow. We will see how the day goes. But the idea is that specialties begin as knowledge expands. Those of you who have gray hair, like me, know that when we first began to start practice, we had general adult units, hospital units, yes? General adult. We saw everything. We don't have those kinds of units in the United States anymore. We have neuro units. We have oncology units. We have medicine units. We do not have generalist units. So the growth in knowledge, the growth in technology, the growth in treatments begins to create this specialization. As this specialization grows, there becomes more organization around the specialty. More nurses who are practicing in the specialty come together to learn from each other, to begin to say, what does it mean to be a specialist in pain management? What does it mean to be a specialist in neuro? What does that look like? And so training begins. Usually this training in stage 2 is on the job. People are learning by experience. They are becoming experts by experience. But in stage 3, people begin to say, this is too fractured. This needs to be standardized. The training and the practice need to become more standardized. Is this making sense to you? So in this stage, we begin to look at the education. We begin to look at what is the role, what is the advanced role of this specialty? What should that look like? These pressures begin to change how we set up the educational system, how we write the job descriptions for people in practice to begin to say, we want advanced level nursing, what does that look like in this specialty? Then in stage 4, you begin to see this maturity, and what we are seeing in the US is a very interesting growth in interdisciplinarity. So for example, in diabetes management, there is an advanced management certification for every clinician working in diabetes management, for medicine, for nursing, for nutrition, for the team that comes together. You see more emphasis on the interprofessional team and the competencies that are brought together by every member of that team to give a more holistic care to the patients in that specialty. I would love to talk to you more about this, but I don't have time. So let me tell you, it is important that I tell you my assumptions, my premises, where I start in how you should interpret my remarks. As I said, this is a concept and it's not a role. So I can be in many roles and be an advanced practice nurse. If you want to be considered an advanced practice nurse, certain core similarities must be present. This is the definition. By definition, I should be able to see these competencies in the practice. We have nurses in the United States who have a master's degree and they were educated to be in one of these roles, but they do not show all these competencies. In my mind, they are not advanced practice nurses. They may be very good specialist nurses, but they are not advanced practice nurses. It is the expected practice of the competencies that advance nursing. My other premise is that direct clinical practice is foundational to any understanding of an advanced practice nurse. So that there are some specialties that evolve. They evolve in important ways. They are very important specialties, but they are not advanced practice nursing. For example, nursing administration is not advanced practice nursing. Nursing informatics is not advanced practice nursing. If people are not engaged in direct clinical practice with patients and families, by my definition, they are not advanced practice nurses. We have to differentiate different levels of practice. So this is a very, very important thing, and I believe one of the speakers even spoke to this. All nurses are valuable. We have practical nurses who are educated in high schools in the United States. They are very valuable nurses, but they are not advanced practice nurses. We have very excellent experts by experience. They are very important nurses. If I am very sick, I want to be taken care of by those nurses who have built their expertise through experience, but they are not necessarily advanced practice nurses. We must be clear on this. At the same time, we must value all nurses. We have a major issue in the United States of people leaving nursing within 3 years. We need to grow this profession. We need to keep people in this profession. We need people to see a career path for them if they wish to grow their expertise in clinical practice. So when I look at this definition, I have a couple of things that I think are important. You will see some differences here from the earlier slide. We have done 5 editions of the Advanced Practice book. I am sad to say they change every single time. This is not my fault. It is because advanced practice continues to change and evolve, and so therefore the definition changes, the core competencies change, everything has to change. So I am getting very old trying to do this right. I do not have it right yet, but this is the 5th try that you will be hearing about now. So why is this so important? We cannot defend what we cannot define. If we want to have advanced practice nursing, we have to be able to say what it is. We have to also be able to say what it is not. We have to be able to say what we expect of it in outcomes to show how important it is to patients. This is not just about nurses and our profession, it is about giving better care to patients. The advanced practice of nursing is not the junior practice of medicine. This is a very important assumption that I make. This is a big challenge in our country with some nurse practitioners who have been educated to do a lot of medical tasks. I have nothing against medical tasks. I did many medical tasks as a clinical specialist. But the medical tasks, including prescriptive authority, does not make an advanced practice nurse. That is not the advanced practice of nursing to take on the junior practice of medicine. This is very, very important. I am happy to debate this. Oops. Uh-oh. How do I go back?
The first one. The second one. Yes.
So I have 2 parts to the definition that I will explain. Oh, wait, I have to go back again. I'm not paying attention, I'm sorry. Okay, so there are 4 parts to my understanding of advanced practice nursing. The first is what I call a conceptual definition, and we will look at that next. Then there is an inner circle called primary criteria. These are things that are regulated in the United States. It is the level of regulation. Advanced practice nursing is not regulated in the larger understanding of the core competencies. It is only regulated in these primary criteria. So the way to think about the primary criteria is that they are necessary, but they are not sufficient. In other words, you must have them, but just by themselves, they are not sufficient to understand advanced practice nursing. You must also show the competencies. But the competencies are very complicated, and so they are not regulated. Then there are a group of elements, I call them environmental elements, things that are in the environments where advanced practice nurses are working that must be managed for advanced practice to succeed. So students have to learn about these environmental elements or they will not be able to succeed in practice So let's look at each piece of this. Here is the conceptual definition. And again, this is different in this edition. I will tell you a little about the differences. Advanced practice is a patient-focused application. That is to say, it is applied at the patient level. Not only at the patient level, but the patient is always the focus of an expanded range of competencies as compared to the professional nurse. These competencies and this application is designed to improve outcomes, the health outcomes of patients. That is the whole point. If we are not making things better for patients, there is no way to defend this level of nursing. I believe very passionately that advanced practice nursing is good for patients. I had certain patients who needed me as their clinical specialist. They were not going to get the same outcomes if they did not have a clinical nurse specialist taking care of them. There were many patients who were going to be fine if I never took care of them. They were going to be fine. But the more complex patients needed someone with my competency set, with my knowledge and my skills. So this is about making a difference for patients, this level of nursing, and for populations. This is an expansion in understanding. Advanced practice nurses are not just focused on the patient in front of them, they are focused on the recurring challenges that that patient population presents. So for example, I began taking care of spinal cord patients. It became very clear to me that there were certain problems all of these patients had. All of the spinal cord patients, particularly the high cervical cord injury patients, had certain problems. So we developed teaching methods and tools to help all of those patients that all of the nurses could use. Does this make sense? So I went beyond the patient in front of me to thinking about what are the recurring things that we need to improve in the practice to help all patients with a spinal cord injury. And then that work began to be used in different places, on different units. It began to expand to the larger population. Does this make sense? In a specialized clinical area. So you see here is specialization, but what you notice is specialization is not the total of the definition. All advanced practice nursing is by definition specialized and within the larger discipline of nursing. This is important in our country because of the history of nurse anesthesia. And we don't have time to talk about that, but it's very interesting history. If you are interested, it's in my book. And actually, lots of these ideas are in my book. You could have saved all the money and just bought everybody a book instead. Okay, but thank you for inviting me. Okay. These are the primary criteria, the things that I told you are necessary but not sufficient. The first is a graduate level education. We did not decide on this in nursing until really the second half of the 20th century, really from the 1980s on, I think. In the United States, we began to say this has to be a master's preparation, but notice that the master's preparation is not the only thing. There is also certification at an advanced level, not a regular certification. We have levels of certification in the states, but an advanced level that specializes, that is about that specialty role. So we now certify to the level of the role and the overall specialty. And this is maybe unique to our country, so I won't spend a lot more time on that. And then the third criteria, again, is that this is a practice focused on patients and families. So for example, in our country, the public health specialty has moved away from direct patient care. The public health nurses who become advanced do a lot of community planning, of working with communities to affect health outcomes, but they are not taking care of individual patients. So they are not considered advanced practice nurses. They are not regulated in the same way. They have a certification as an advanced public health nurse, This is a very important role, but it is not an advanced practice nursing role. So do you see here what I am saying? We are all valuable, but we are not all the same. We have to decide, you have to decide within your countries who will be considered an advanced practice nurse. And how do we define this? How do we prepare for this in a consistent, standardized way so that the public understands, if I say I am an advanced practice nurse, they know what that means. So here is the central model, and the central model shows these direct clinical practice, as the central competency, and then it shows the other core competencies. So there are 7 core competencies altogether. In terms of the figure, the differences in the figure for this edition, there are a couple of differences that I would point out to you. One is that, is there a pointer? Well, one is this. There is sometimes a misunderstanding in our country about research. Research in our country means the development of new knowledge, original research. I call it big R research. Then there is a terrific need. Oh, thank you so much. Yes, that's this one.
Il faut le mettre sur la clé.
Yes, we will try.
Il faut le mettre sur
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so we have the research of discovery, we call it, original research, but then we have a very huge need for people to be able to read this research, to be able to understand and apply this research into their specialty practice. This application of research we call evidence-based practice. It is increasingly clear, it has been clear in my mind all along, really, for a million years, that advanced practice nurses did not do big R research, what I call the big R research of discovery. Even though in the early days I was taught that I was supposed to do that kind of research. But now it is very clear that what is equally important is that we take research findings and translate them into practice, make them real in practice, apply them, see what works and what doesn't work. In the United States, the average time to diffuse an innovation, meaning to take a research finding and put it strongly in practice, is over 8 years. This is too long. This keeps us behind. So we both need, this is why we have a growth in the PhD programs, because the PhD programs prepare researchers, people who can do original research. And then we have a need that they partner with the advanced practice nurse to put that research into practice. So this, okay, so let me say that every one of these competencies has a very specific definition in the context of advanced practice nursing. So there is a special definition of consultation, there is a special definition of collaboration, there is a special definition of ethics. There are 4 phases of the ethical decision-making competency in advanced practice nursing that go all the way up to ensuring ethical environments for practice and building a more just healthcare system. Very big expectations. It is not about being a good person. I hope you are all good persons. But these competencies are areas of knowledge and skilled performance expectations. So there are very different, explicit definitions for each one of them. So the idea of the model, my editor called this the hubcap, said it looked like a hubcap. I said, well, maybe. The idea of this model is that direct clinical practice interacts with all of the other competencies to create the expertise in a very seamless way. That's why it's a circle, it's seamless. That's why there are holes. Do you see the holes between the 2 levels of competency? So that your direct clinical practice is informing the kind of coaching and guidance you do with patients. It is informing the way you collaborate. And your collaboration is, in turn, informing your practice. So this works back and forth, like a semi-permeable membrane. So what you see here is the core competencies are embedded. This is supposed to look like a cloud. My editor calls this the fried egg. I told him I did not make these things up to look like something. I make them up to help an idea. He says it still looks like a fried egg. Okay, so he's now not an editor anymore. I think I drove him away. All right. He's a priest, actually, he's a good priest. Okay, so if we look at these environmental elements, this is supposed to be like the cloud of the environment surrounding the practice. And so what you see here, oh, can you find this? You see here that how practices are regulated influences how a person can practice. And many of the speakers this morning were talking about the issue of how do we move these practices into reality. And regulation is a very important issue that must be managed to be able to have this kind of practice. The way policy decisions are made dramatically influences advanced practice. How to run a business, the business aspects of a large institution or a small clinic. People must pay a salary, the clinic must survive. So all of these things, outcome evaluation, how you learn how to evaluate, to develop nurse-sensitive outcomes and evaluate them, how you learn to market yourself and describe your practice, what kind of structure you are placed in, all of these things will influence the way this practice looks. Does this make sense to you? So one of the implications here is that education for advanced practice must include these critical environmental elements so that people's practices can survive and grow in practice settings. This is just a quick shot to show you what has happened to the numbers of advanced practice nurses in the United States. This is about, as you see in 2000, this is about 196,000 advanced practice nurses, and now we have over 250,000. What you will see is the biggest growth area is the nurse practitioner. Okay, so why do we need advanced practice nurses? Why do we not just let nurses get more and more experienced and learn along the way and be very good at nursing professional practice? Well, I think here are some reasons why we need to move toward, why we have moved toward advanced practice nursing. And one is this notion of population holistic care to larger populations through influencing systems and health policy. A second is expanding access. We have major problems with patients, particularly patients from vulnerable populations, patients without insurance in our country, in being able to access a healthcare provider. There are not enough physicians in rural areas in particular. So growing advanced practice nurses who can manage the care of patients. We have data now that show that nurse practitioners can manage between 80 and 90% of all the problems that are seen in primary care. So that is a much more cost-effective way to manage these patients than say you must go find a physician even if that physician is 4 hours away. Another reason we need advanced practice nursing is so that we strengthen, as I was talking about, that we are bringing research, we are bringing theoretical understanding, we are bringing expanded, complex, practice-based knowledge. We are bringing all that together in caring for patients so that we are becoming more sophisticated and more able to manage complex nursing care problems. Another reason for advanced practice nursing is to improve nursing retention. One of the major roles of the clinical nurse specialist is to guide, develop, and support nursing staff This development and support of nursing staff can be crucial to nurses deciding to remain in nursing. And also, advanced practice offers a career path for our younger clinicians who wish to continue their development. It shows them a path to development. Translating research into practice improvements, I've also discussed. Helping create ethical environments, and then this notion of leadership in interprofessional teams. One of the core competent practice is collaboration, working in partnership with other members of the team, including physicians, not working in a hierarchy. Maybe you all do not have the hierarchy, but I guess you probably do. We still have it in many places, but one of the things that we teach is the expectation of collaboration. We teach advanced practice nurses how to collaborate as a full partner of an interprofessional team. And those teams, we are gathering more and more data that patients benefit from that kind of teamwork. And I used to say to my students, you can teach doctors to collaborate, but you should be prepared to teach them to collaborate. They may not have learned how to do this in their medical education. All right, so now we can talk more about why we need particular APNs, but now we are going into looking at APN research. There is a great deal of research, and increasingly it is research focused on outcomes. This is excellent, excellent work. In the early years of research work, it was much more focused on what is the advanced practice nurse, what does that nurse do, what does that practice look like. Now we are pretty clear about that in the United States, so we are not researching that anymore. We are much more researching what is happening to patients by virtue of having advanced practice nurses in the settings and systems where these patients are being cared for. So there are some major things I will call to your attention. Actually, there are three things I'll call to your attention. Do you know the Cochrane database reviews? Do you know Cochrane?
Yes.
Cochrane is a very important organization in the United States that takes evidence and puts that evidence together and makes a judgment about whether that evidence is definitive, is adequate to make a statement. And there are two now database reviews. 10 years ago there were none. That looked at the evidence on the impact of primary care. That's supposed to say primary care nurse practitioners and certified nurse midwives. There is also an article that came out that was a review of 107 studies done between 1990 and 2008. I will give you a summary of that on the next slide, done by Robin Newhouse and her colleagues to show also the strength of the evidence that is now being prepared. And we now have enough evidence to say that advanced practice care is comparable or superior to that provided by other providers. Now, okay, so I'll say some things about that in a minute. So this is the Newhouse, these were the Newhouse findings. Many of the studies that have been done of nurse practitioners have compared their outcomes to those of physicians. This is an important thing to be able to demonstrate that nurse practitioners can safely substitute for physicians, but it is unfortunate if it gives the impression that this role is only about substituting for physicians, because it is not. So we need more studies that look at advanced practice nursing outcomes rather than just medical outcomes. But this is a very good start. One of the biggest studies that was done by Mary Mundiger, who looked at primary care nurse practitioners in a clinic where the patients were randomly assigned between physicians and primary care nurse practitioners, and the care was comparable. So what you see is comparable in hospital readmissions, in emergency department visits. And in some ways, and in particular, one of the interesting findings for midwifery was that there were lower C-section rates and improved breastfeeding rates in patients cared for by midwives as cared for by obstetricians. So the largest number of studies were of NPs, but as I'm showing you here in these examples, many of the outcomes were very medically driven. So we are still working on more evidence in terms of APN-sensitive outcomes. There is a good deal of data on the clinical nurse specialist that also shows that clinical nurse specialist interventions decrease the length of stay for patients, decrease the costs of care by helping people be prepared to care for themselves at home rather than in the expensive hospital. Patients have very high satisfaction. We also have very good data in terms of nursing knowledge based on clinical specialist interventions. There is not as much data on nurse and anesthetists, but again, most studies that do exist are quite similar to physicians, comparing their practice to physicians. This is something you cannot read, but I'm showing it as an example. We have a chapter in the book which looks at, in this new book, that looks at reviewing all of the evidence in the last 10 years. We look at all of the evidence for every role. And what we do in that chapter, Ruth Kleinpel, some of you may know Ruth, and Alexander Wojner, Anne Wojner-Alexandrov did this chapter this time. What we do is you will see on the left an outcome indicator. So these are many APN-sensitive outcome indicators. So notice how they move beyond a medical indicator. How able patients are to engage in activities of daily living is an important nursing outcome. Yes? 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 No? How people manage their anxiety or their emotional state. How they comply or adhere to teaching. We can teach anybody anything. We can give them lots of good materials. The issue is, do they adjust their life to manage their anemia or their chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or their spinal cord injury? So adherence is a very important variable for nursing, a very important nurse-sensitive outcome. So you see on the left, you see all the outcome indicators. Then what you see is every study that has used that outcome indicator. That's the second column. Every study. Then you see what kind of design was the study. Was it specific to a particular population? And then what were the findings? This table is now 5 pages long. So there is a lot of evidence. And the ability to use that evidence and to read and understand that evidence is critical to making an argument for why do we need advanced practice nursing. So that one of the reasons we need advanced practice nursing is, notice, if I just look at activities of daily living, you see 3 studies, and in every one of those studies, being cared for by an advanced practice nurse significantly improved those patients' activities of daily living. Okay? So when someone says to you, why do you need advanced practice nurses, you can go to that table. You can say, give me an outcome indicator. Quick, quick, quick. They're in alphabetical order. You can find it, and you can say, because we have a study that shows this, would you like to see the study? Right? So I call this chapter ammunition. But of course I couldn't say ammunition in the title. So it says integrated review instead. All right, how am I doing? How am I doing? Am I okay? Time? Okay. All right, so if we begin, there's much more to say about all these things, but if we shift to an international focus now, we are seeing a very rapid evolution in advanced practice nursing. In fact, this is the major change in our new book. We have incorporated international literature very strongly in our new book. We have a whole chapter on international developments in advanced practice nursing because there is such an international growth in people wanting this level of nursing practice. While the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom are often seen as models, I think that every country has to evolve their understanding of advanced practice nursing in some unique ways based on the challenges and opportunities that are present in that country. So we have two examples in the book of international developments. I will share one of them with you from the Netherlands, and you see that they are different. And we could have had 5 examples and they would be 5 different things, but there are certain things that are in common, and I think a lot of the development in common is to move toward the primary criteria, which is, I think, very important for standardizing our understanding of advanced practice. If you look at the International Council for Nursing's definition of advanced practice nursing, this is it. And what you notice right away is a seeming conflation of nurse practitioner and advanced practice nurse. This is something I have lively debates about with my international colleagues because I think advanced practice nurse is many more roles than just the nurse practitioner, as I said. But notice is a registered nurse who has acquired an expert knowledge base, complex decision-making skills, and clinical competencies. So again, they are alluding to the growth of competencies to be called an advanced practice nurse, which are shaped by the context and/or country in which he or she is credentialed to practice. So that is where the individuality comes in. I think this is important. I think Canada is extremely interesting. Is there anyone here from Canada? Oh, many of you. Yes. Well, I think you guys are very interesting. And part of the reason that you are interesting to me is because in the 70s, Canada moved very quickly into the clinical nurse specialist role and developed very strong theory-based practice with the clinical specialist integrating a lot of theory-based understandings into practice. And then that role just almost vanished. Things began to be very complex there for economics, and then you began to see this growth of nurse practitioners who were certificate prepared. They were not prepared as advanced practice nurses, and now you begin to see the nurse practitioners going into advanced practice programs in universities. Am I correct in this? So it is very interesting to see how in Canada, it's more like certain roles have grown and not grown, rather than the core concept of advanced practice. And now you see the work of Alba DiCenzo, Denise Bryant-Koshas, some wonderful, wonderful people up in Canada who are growing then this notion of advanced practice again. And so this is a relatively new thing. So every country has its own path, and I think that part of what is exciting in a conference like this is it is an opportunity for you to begin thinking and talking with each other about what the paths you should take. How should you move these paths forward? And yes, there are many, many challenges, but we must always begin. We must always begin. When I first worked collaboratively with the neurosurgeons, they did not know what to do with me. They had never had a nurse who challenged them the way I did, who did things for patients without getting their permission. I asked a lot of forgiveness. I did not very often ask permission. This kept me sort of in constant trouble at first. But then they began to see what I was doing for their patients, you see? And it was never about me. It was always about what I was doing for their patients. Good doctors care very much about what happens to their patients, and those doctors became my champions. So we must begin. If you wait for everything to be perfect, you will never begin. All right, so if we look in the Netherlands, this is very interesting because the Netherlands uses the term nurse practitioner for everything, but when you look at how they practice almost exclusively in hospitals, and they do many of the things that nurse specialists do. So they started with the term nurse practitioner because I think of INPAPN, which was saying advanced practice nurse is nurse practitioner, those are the same. And now they are moving to call them more specialist nurses. If you look at the core role of a clinical expert, you see 6 complementary roles. One of them is professional. We would probably not use that term in the United States because we think advanced practice builds on professional nursing. It assumes professional nursing, but it goes to a different level. But also communication, collaboration, manager. We don't usually put manager, but we use leader instead, leader. Health advocate in terms of expertise, and scholar in terms of use of research and theory-based knowledge to incorporate in practice. So do you see some of these competencies and how they are being reflected in the development of this specialist, clinical nurse specialist role in the Netherlands? They started in '97 and they now have over 1,300. They probably have more than that now because it's 2013. Okay, so just when you think, oh good, this is starting to make sense to me, here's a study that my colleague Rose Pulcini did. She actually did the study in 2009 at an international INPAPN meeting. You know what I mean when I say INPAPN? Do you know INPAPN?
No.
It is the International Council of Nurses Advanced Practice Nursing Network. And because they use NPAPN, they call it INPAPN. Nurse Practitioner Advanced Practice Nursing, INPAPN. I did not make this up. Okay. So, when she did the study, here are the different names, titles she sees. This is what there were 86 respondents in this study. Here are the titles that you see. Many different titles, correct?
Yes.
Some titles are titles that I would not consider advanced practice at all. Professional nurse, staff nurse, RN basic nurse. These are not advanced practice. I would not call that advanced practice. So I would need to know this story to understand this. Expert nurse, all of these people should be experts in their specialty. So you see there's many, many differences. The UK has developed this nurse consultant role. Any of you here from the UK?
No, but in Australia.
Ah, two.
Well, I'm not from the UK, but in Australia they
Have the nurse consultant role also. It is very similar to the clinical specialist, except it does almost exclusively consultation, so the direct clinical practice is a little bit unclear to me, but it is something that is very promoted in the UK. And then also in Australia, promoted also there? Okay. But not so much, fewer here. So what you see is we have many different titles for many different practice areas. So here are the major practice specialties that you see: community health, mental health, and hospital acute care, within a large load of disease-specific, age or family-specific, and then also family, geriatric, pediatric, adult, women's health. So in the international, so there is a lot of variability internationally, and there is a large proportion of advanced practice nurses who work in hospitals or community or hospital-based clinics. Those are generally where people work rather than in primary care. In the United States, the role that is growing the most is the primary care nurse practitioner specialty. So, okay, I cannot talk anymore about this. Oh, I cannot talk about these things. All right, these are some of the major challenges and issues that can be seen in international evolution of advanced practice, and it really is an evolution. It's important to think of it this way. We will not be able to talk about each of these, but maybe at the end of the conference, I will be thinking, and I will be with you through the conference, and I will be thinking about these things, and we can talk some more about some of them that provide particular challenges for you in French-speaking Europe. Would that be helpful? So you see the titles and power differences between nurses and physicians not understanding or supporting advanced practice, and the whole issue of educational preparation was a big theme this morning. The issue of how we value expertise, how we deal with cultural differences, how we deal with payments, reimbursement regulations, and education. So you see I have much to say on these things. You can hear them later. Okay, so here are some things I will leave you with. As we continue to evolve advanced practice, and particularly as advanced practice nursing continues to evolve in the world, this issue of titling, I think, is very important for clarity. It is important that people understand these roles. I like to say that I want to have my students stand in the line at the grocery store with their milk. Okay, they are in the line with their milk, and a person in line in front of them says, "Do you know what a clinical," or she says, my student says to this person who also has their milk in the grocery store, "Do you know what a clinical nurse specialist is?" And that person says, "Yes, I do. It's an expert nurse who works with other nurses and complex patients to make care better in systems that provide patient care." I want us to be that clear. I want the people in the grocery store to be that clear. Do you see? If we call ourselves 50 different things, how do we expect the person in line with their milk to understand what we are talking about? We must be clear. The clarity must start with us. I tell my children that my tombstone should say, "She tried to be clear." This is not to say we are all the same. Oh, you just got the joke. Oh, it was a joke. I don't know if they'll do that or not. They have minds of their own, right? All right. Cultural differences. Oh, you just got that. Cultural differences. This does not mean we will all be exactly the same. Cultural differences must be honored and must be celebrated. So the trick is, how do we harmonize our understandings in a way that promotes clarity? This is one of the reasons we have different roles. We cannot say advanced practice nurse, because sometimes that's a nurse who's going to deliver anesthesia or pain blocks. Sometimes that's a nurse who's going to deliver a baby. Sometimes that's a nurse who's going to do a well child checkup in a rural clinic. Sometimes that's a nurse who's going to be called in after a very difficult spinal surgery to help that patient manage their disability after that surgery. You see, these are very different things. That's why we have different names for our roles. But this goal of expanding advanced practice nursing to improve health outcomes is, I think, a shared goal around the world. This is why advanced practice nursing is growing around the world. People know we can do a better job of taking care of patients if we advance our own professional practice. So, where are you in your evolution to advanced practice? This is my question for you. Where are you? What differences do you see now? What differences do you want to keep? What differences do you need to say goodbye to grow a unified understanding of advanced practice? How do you wish to align with other definitions? As you see, the ICN definition is not the same as my definition. If you would like 4 or 5 more, I can give them to you. There are many definitions still. What definitions will work the best for you? Is it desirable to standardize? across French-speaking Europe, or is it not? Would it be better for Switzerland to do something different than Belgium or France? These are not questions I can answer. These are questions that you must answer. But I will leave you with this thought. The nursing profession, nationally and internationally, remains at a critical juncture with regard to advanced practice nursing. We have been working at this a long time in the States, and we are still at a very critical juncture. In each country in which APNs practice, the need to move forward with one voice on this issue, one voice, is urgent. If APNs and the nursing profession can fulfill their social contract with the individual patients, with the institutions, and with the people and communities that we serve. I wish you very good luck with this thinking and this work that you are doing. I am very honored to get to be with you for 2 days to talk about these ideas. So I look forward to talking with you and learning from you over the next 2 days. Thank you.
C'est peut-être l'autre, si jamais. Il y en avait un qui ne marchait pas, je pense, ce matin.
Ooh, yes, you're very loud.
Oui, nous avons
Oh.
7 minutes pour la première question.
Okay. Oh,
Alors, on fera peut-être à peine plus long, mais juste une petite instruction donc, au niveau du micro. Attendez bien d'avoir le micro en fait en main pour poser une question, pour permettre alors justement aux gens du bocal là-haut, justement, de faire une traduction.
Bonjour, je travaille à Genève, je suis en formation master et je suis intéressée à savoir, vous parlez d'une spécialisation très rapide aux États-Unis avec des masters spécialisés. J'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce que ça a comme répercussion pour les choix de carrière des infirmières. Parce qu'une fois qu'on a un master en quelque chose de spécialisé, est-ce qu'on peut bouger facilement pour une autre pratique ou non? Contrairement à un master qui se fait en sorte de base et puis ensuite on se spécialise avec des DAS ou autre chose.
yes. Oh, that's an excellent question. Everyone has the question. I would say, okay, so for example, when I was educated, I had a master's in adult medical surgical nursing, very, very broad. And I was not given any specific role preparation except in one class because clinical specialization was very new and there was not a lot to read. In fact, I could read everything that was written about it. It was about very short. So when I got out, I could specialize in many, many ways. This is no longer possible or accepted in the United States because of the growth in knowledge and technology and the expansion of practice into an area. If you become a primary care nurse practitioner where you work with patients across the life, a family practitioner in a primary care setting, clinic or community, you cannot then go be an acute care specialized practitioner without going back to school. You have to go back to school to receive a postmaster's or to move on to the doctor of nursing practice, which I have not talked about and won't. It is a further complication. So the states, there's a very influential document about regulation of advanced practice. It's called the consensus model. I would be happy to show it to you if we have some time, but it's very US specific. And that model states that you are prepared for a specialty and a role. You take a certification exam for a specialty, it's actually called a population focus. This is hard to translate because it isn't truly a specialty, but it's kind of a specialty. It's very difficult. population focus and role, so that if you then want to change to a different role or a different population, you are expected to go back to school. I should say that this is, the consensus model was finished in 2008, so this is new. It is calling for regulation across all of the states of the United States. Right now, nursing is regulated at the state level in the United States, and so this model is calling for the same regulation all the way in all the states. It is regulation at the primary criteria, and it is not accepted by everyone yet.